So we're going to move on to our next panelist, and it is Darla Schumm, and she is the John P. Wheeler Professor of Religion at Hollins University. Darla, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Cesar, and thanks to all of the organizers and presenters for participating in such important conversations. My work sits at the nexus of the sociology of religion, religious ethics, and disability studies. And so I am looking at a violence of a different kind, a more implicit violence, and that is the violence of ableism as it is carried out within the context of religious communities and organizations. So what I'm going to talk about today is a more implicit form of violence, and how the overarching question I'm asking is how does ableism show up in religious communities, and do religious communities promote or hinder disability justice? To get us started, I want to think about the work of Black feminist theorist Patricia Hill Collins. Hill Collins talks about controlling images, and she defines controlling images as negative and stereotypical images and representations that perpetuate the subordination and oppression of Black women. While Hill Collins's work is focused specifically on Black women, I take her idea of controlling images and ask, what are the controlling images that emerge out of religious communities that are negative and stereotypical images and representations that perpetuate the subordination and oppression of people with disabilities within those communities? My research relies in part on interviews that I've conducted with people who have disabilities in religious communities and organizations. And I also draw on my own experience as a blind woman. So as a researcher, scholar, teacher who not only works on disability, but who lives with disability. There are many controlling images that emerge out of my research, but the two most prevalent and the two that I'm going to focus on today are that of the sinner and the saint. So the controlling image of the sinner maintains that disability results in part because of sin, either sin of the individual disabled person or person with a disability, or in some religious traditions, the sin of the parents. That comes specifically out of the Christian tradition, but we see that elsewhere as well. The controlling image of the saint is a little bit different in that it views people with disabilities as saintly inspirations who endure disability in this world, but will have some type of healing, cure, reward in a future world. So this is very much a forward-looking gaze. And saints are those who live among us, enduring things that the rest of us could not endure, or so the narrative goes for the controlling image of the saint. Now, at first glance, these two controlling images may appear to be opposite. Less than on the one hand, less than as the sinner, more than on the other hand, more than as the saint. But if we dig a little deeper, we find that the sinner and saint controlling images actually share a lot in common. And I identify four what I call problematic parallels of the sinner and saint controlling images. The first problematic parallel is that for both the sinner and saint, disability resides squarely in the individual body, and is cast as the failure or flaw of the individual body. The second problematic parallel is that both the sinner and saint controlling images demark a very distinct difference between us and them. So there is us, the non-disabled, them, the disabled. The third problematic parallel is that the sinner and saint images both situate disability squarely in the narrative of suffering. And I thought about this during Catherine's excellent presentation, and I think there might be some fruitful moments for conversation about how we think about disability squarely as suffering, or are there other ways to think about disability? And then the fourth problematic parallel is that both sinner and saint are grow out of an understanding of pity, which is always patronizing. So the sinner and saint are always pitied for their disabilities, and this is a problematic conception of disability. I want to offer an alternative controlling image that has a more positive spin. So to think about a controlling image that is less grounded in negative stereotypes. And I borrow a concept from feminist disability theorist Rosemary Garland Thompson for reorienting or disorienting some controlling images of disability. And that is Garland Thompson's critical conception of the misfit. The misfit, to misfit, according to Garland Thompson, and to rethink disability through the conception of misfit is to think about disability as the encounter between flesh and world. For Garland Thompson, this encounter helps us think about disability not as a stable state of being, but as a state of being that is constantly in flux, because I misfit here, but I may fit there. Likewise, you misfit here, but you may fit there. Bodies in motion instead of a stable state of existence for our bodies. Garland Thompson talks about the juxtaposition of trying to put a square peg in a round hole. The problem is not with the inherent nature of the two things, but the juxtaposition of trying to put them together. So when body or flesh meets environment. When we think about disability as misfit, we can start to look at some of the problematic parallels and rethink them. Disability as misfit helps us locate the quote unquote problem of disability, not with the inherent nature of the disabled body, but with the nature of the encounter between body and material world. It breaks down the us-them dichotomy because, again, all bodies fit in certain contexts and misfit in other contexts. It challenges the narrative that disability is always suffering, and related to that, connected to that, it helps us think about the disabled experience not just as one of pity, but perhaps most importantly, disability as misfit helps us think about how disability provides subjective knowledge for reorienting our thinking and for strategizing ways that we can strive to provide the widest range of fits for the greatest number of bodies. And in this way, disability as misfit challenges the very structures of ableism and helps us think about how we can promote disability justice. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to our continued conversation.
Thanks to you, Darla. That was very, very insightful, and I would say some perspectives that one doesn't often hear, about this conversation, but that I think fits right in, and it's a wonderful compliment to what we have heard thus far. Thank you so much.